Genesis 24, 27, he said that's Abraham's servant. Blessed be the Lord of my master Abraham, who has not forsaken his loving kindness and his truth toward my master. As for me, the Lord has guided me in the way to the house of my master's brother. This is Genesis 24. Remember, this is Abraham charged his servant to get a bride for Isaac. And of course, he's sent out on this mission to ultimately find the right bride for Isaac, Abraham's son of promise. This verse is a remarkable prayer because it shows God working through ordinary circumstances to accomplish his purpose. Abraham sends his servant to find the wife for Isaac, and the servant does not simply rush ahead with his own plans. He prays and asks God to guide him. We read this in verse 11 and 12. He said, verse 12, O Lord, the God of my master Abraham, please grant me success today and show loving kindness to my master Abraham. So as the chapter unfolds, we see God's providence bringing the right people together at exactly the right time. And here we see God was faithful to guide his people and to fulfill his purposes. Abraham knew that Isaac's future was important because God had already made promises concerning him. Abraham sends his servant to find a wife for Isaac, but he makes it clear that God's purposes must come first. The servant is not simply looking for anyone. He is looking for a woman God has prepared. And this reminds us that our lives are not random. Proverbs chapter 3, verses 5 and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make straight your paths. We do not always know what God is doing, but we can trust the one who does. Then, of course, we read verse 12, and there, of course, we see that the servant stops and prays. He does not rely on his own wisdom. He asks God to lead him. This is a good pattern for us from prayer. Before making decisions, we should pray. Before stepping into something new, we should pray. Prayer does not mean that God's will always gives us the exact answer we expect, but it demonstrates we recognize our dependence upon him. James 1, verse 5 says, if any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God. We do not have to know everything. We can ask God for wisdom and trust him to lead us. Thirdly, we see God works through ordinary events. One of the beautiful things about Genesis 24 is that there is no spectacular miracle. There's no earthquake, there's no fire from heaven or dramatic sign. Instead, God works through ordinary events of life. Rebecca comes to the well. She gives water to the servant, then offers water to the camels. And the servant recognizes that God is answering prayer. Verse 21, we read, meanwhile the man was gazing at her in silence to know whether the Lord had made his journey successful or not. The servant recognizes that God is answering his prayer, and he's watching carefully to see God's leading. Sometimes we expect God to work only through dramatic events, but God often works through ordinary circumstances, conversations, opportunities, and people. Romans chapter 8, verse 28 reminds us that those that love God, all things work together for good. God is able to work through circumstances we might consider completely ordinary. Next, we see that God was faithful to his promise. We read Genesis 24, 27 there at the bottom of the page. And there we see the servant does not take credit for finding Rebecca. He recognizes the hand of God. This should be our response when we see God working in our lives and in the lives of others. We can easily say, I worked that out, or everything just happened to fall into place. But the Christian should learn to recognize God's providence and give him the glory. God had promised Abraham that his family would continue, and God was faithfully working to that promise. And lastly, we see that there was trusting God with the next step. at the end of the chapter, Rebecca leaves her family and travels to meet Isaac. We read this right at the end of chapter 24. Read this verse 67. And Isaac brought her to his mother Sarah's tent, and he took Rebekah, and she became his wife, and he loved her. Thus Isaac was comforted after his mother's death. Rebekah leaves her family and travels and meets Isaac. She does not know everything that lies ahead, but she is willing to take the next step. That is often how God leads. He does not give us the whole map. He gives us enough light for the next step. Psalm 119, 105 says, "Your word is a lamp to my feet and a light to my path." A lamp does not show us the entire journey at once. It gives us enough light to take the next step. We may not know what the future holds, but we know the God who holds the future. So this chapter teaches us, chapter 24, that God guides his people, answers prayer, and works through ordinary circumstances. The servant prayed, God answered. Rebekah came, and Isaac received his wife. What looked like a series of ordinary events was actually the providence of God at work. So when we face decisions, pray. When you do not know what to do, seek God's wisdom. When circumstances look ordinary, look for God's hand, and when you cannot see what lies ahead, trust his faithfulness. We do not need to know everything God is doing. We simply need to know that God is faithful. Genesis 24:27, Blessed be the Lord, who has not forsaken his steadfast love and his faithfulness. Thank you for listening.